a devoted mother working to carve out a new life.
She's very religious, believes in family.
She would help anyone.
Is murdered in her own home.
She had clearly been under attack when she reached for the phone.
It was devastating.
Detectives follow the evidence down a twisted path.
Who was this person?
He's giving envelopes of money to Monica.
In her mind, they were going to be married until death do them part.
After a number of suspects emerge,
They jokingly referred to themselves as the Orange Shorts Society.
He cried, but it was very fake.
Monica told me if anything ever happens to me, that he was responsible.
the killer is someone no one could have predicted.
The whole thing was just surreal.
And I'm like, oh my God, you almost got away with it.
Glenville, Pennsylvania. It's a small, proud community where everyone knows their neighbor by name.
It wasn't really even a town, it was rural. Good, decent people. You could just keep the doors open on warm days, sitting on the porch and just relaxing and enjoying the peace.
It's a rural area in central Pennsylvania, so it's not typical for a violent crime to occur, and if it does occur, it's an abnormality.
On a spring afternoon in 2010, that peaceful atmosphere is interrupted when dispatchers at York County Control get a mysterious call.
Someone had dialed 911.
911.
And no one was saying anything.
Hello?
The dispatcher that received the call was inquiring, hello, is anyone there? So the protocol at the time was hang up and call it back. They received a busy signal, so the phone was off the hook. They dispatched Southwestern Regional Police. A patrolman entered the residence and announced himself that he was with law enforcement. And as he made a right into the living room area, he discovered the body. There was a lot of blood around her head, as well as on the floor.
A forensics team arrives within minutes, with 2 homicide detectives following close behind.
The victim was found lying in almost like a fetal position.
They find the victim's driver's license, which identifies her as 55-year-old Monica Schmeier. Closer inspection of the body reveals she met a violent end.
She had clearly been under attack when she reached for the phone to try to call for help.
There was a telephone with the receiver off just above her body, lying there, and there was some blood on the 9 and the 1 of the telephone.
Very close to Monica's body, detectives find an important piece of evidence.
We located a small shell casing that was lying on the ground. We searched for a firearm or ammunition, a holster, anything that would lead us to believe that there would have been a gun in the house. There was none located.
The forensics team pores over the crime scene, hoping to turn up something that can help them understand the crime.
We did fingerprinting, we did photography, we searched around the house. There was nothing there to lead us to believe that it was a home invasion, and it was very mysterious to us as far as, what happened here.
Another detail suggests Monica wasn't the victim of a robbery gone wrong.
We did locate some cash in the home that were in white envelopes that were on the bookshelf. We found cash in bins that were packed up that you could visibly see as you walked around the house.
The envelopes we found were very easy to see. Some of them would have maybe $100 in them. Some of them only had a few dollars. Each one of them had a designation on the envelope, like to the church or for a bill or something like that.
Investigators begin collecting forensic evidence for further analysis.
The evidence we collected in the home consisted of the money envelopes, the blood evidence, scrapings from the phone, from the floor, and fingerprints. A Rolodex was found. On the Rolodex, we found some close contact information.
While forensics continue their work at the scene, detectives track down Monica's family to deliver the terrible news.
Monica had 2 adult daughters, Veronica and Elsa, and they were not living at home at the time of her killing. Veronica was in Florida, and Elsa was out of the country.
Both daughters are stunned by the murder and say that their mother was known for her charity, which had only increased since their parents' divorce.
Monica Schmeier's daughters said that she would help anyone, extremely generous, volunteered her time in the community, was a devout Catholic, very involved in her church.
Monica's brother, Eric, is no less shocked when police inform him of his sister's murder.
It was April 1st, which is April Fool's Day. I'm thinking, is this a prank? What, my sister's been killed? It was devastating. Monica was not only my sister, she was my next door neighbor.
Detectives ask Eric to tell them more about his sister, in the hope that something from her past will point them toward her killer.
We were raised in a Catholic family in northern New Jersey. We had a simple, frugal life, 5 siblings. I was the eldest and she was the 4th. She was the smartest out of all 5 of us. Monica was very studious and very determined. Even when she was a little kid, she was a bookworm. She aced everything through college, grammar school, high school. Monica studied like crazy and went to medical school. She was going to do her internship. She was starting it in New York City.
As Monica was chasing her dreams, her life took an unexpected turn.
She met John Schmeier, and they fell in love. She became pregnant, and that was a surprise to both of them.
The young couple got married in 1981 and began building a happy life together.
Monica became a mother, and she felt that she had really found her niche. And she just loved being a mother. John, he went and got his degrees, and he became an ophthalmologist and was offered a position in Hanover, Pennsylvania. They asked me to come along and be the office manager.
With John busy at work, Monica focused on motherhood and let her own career go by the wayside.
She was supposed to do her internship. Then she got pregnant again. I don't know how expected that was, but she loved it. Her focus became being a mother. She was dedicated to John and her 2 daughters. A nice wooden house with 60 acres. That's what she wanted more than anything. John gave that to her.
Over the years, John's career thrived, but the couple's marriage began to suffer. In 2003, after 22 years of marriage, he asked Monica for a divorce.
She was devastated. She was so much in love with John. She's very religious, believes in family, so she didn't want to agree to divorce. She got suicidal and she went into a depression. All she did was just cry, and you could see how miserable she felt. I was worried about Monica, but I felt if Monica needed any help, I was right down the street.
Finally, in 2008, after 5 years of resisting, Monica agreed to sign the divorce papers. Their unusual settlement agreement helps investigators understand why Monica had envelopes of cash stashed around her house.
John was paying Monica $1,700 a month in alimony. He had also given her the family home and much of their savings because it was him who wanted that divorce, not her.
There was alimony being paid, but he did so in cash, which was weird because Monica didn't have a bank account.
Monica Schmeier did not like to use banks, didn't trust them, preferred to keep the cash in her home.
But with Monica having no other source of income, John grew wary of the arrangement.
John was pissed off that he had to pay her in cash. He was upset that he had to pay her bills for her. He paid for everything.
Could John's resentment have grown so great he wanted Monica dead? When detectives ask Eric, his answer is shocking.
Monica told me if anything ever happens to me, John is responsible because she was scared that John would do something to hurt her.
Coming up, does a grieving spouse have something to hide?
He cried, but there were no tears. It was very fake.
A surprising lead sends the case in a new direction.
What struck me most is how utterly random it was.
And the truth blindsides everyone.
It was like an aha moment for me. Why did you lie to me?
York County Police investigating the horrific murder of Monica Schmeier have reason to be suspicious of Monica's ex-husband, John.
We had information from Eric, Monica's brother, that Monica had stated that if anything ever happened to her, that John would be responsible for that.
Investigators quickly head over to John's house. When they tell him about Monica's murder, they're surprised by his behavior.
John reacted in a way that was very awkward and very unusual, something that in my years I'd never seen. Oh my God, he put his hand across his chest.
Maybe some of it was a little fake. Maybe the clutching of the heart was a little fake.
He began to cry, would probably be a stretch. There were no tears. Myself, I do believe it was very fake. He covered his face, would look up and see if we were watching him. And as he's doing this, it's like, oh my God, this is just so weird. And it's like, is he involved?
Detectives asked John to come down to the precinct to talk.
He explained to me about this weird and unusual arrangement that he had with Monica. The envelopes that we found in the home would be labeled like electric bill, water bill, mortgage, whatever, but they were used to give back to John so that John could then pay her bills. So we're looking at this from the outside, wondering what the hell's going on, that he's paying her in cash. She is now taking cash, putting it in envelopes, giving it back to John. John's then writing a check to pay her electric bill. So it was fueling that frustration and animosity in John's perspective. He's still doing everything for Monica, even though they're not married anymore. Because being a devout Catholic, Monica didn't care they were divorced. In her mind, they were still married, and they were going to be married until death do they part.
John admits that the situation bothered him, but he says he'd never resort to murder.
He agreed. It's very frustrating. It was very much a pain for him to do all this stuff, but he couldn't get rid of her, is for lack of a better phrase.
Anxious to prove his innocence, John provides police with an alibi.
He was able to provide us with a detailed explanation as to what he had done that day, where he was, and who he was with.
John tells the detectives he was meeting with an acquaintance named Sarah Powell before the two of them joined up with a larger group at a local restaurant.
And I asked him if he has information that can verify his alibi, and he was able to provide me with a cell phone number for Sarah Powell. We wrapped up the interviews. We advised John Schmeier to stay away from the home. We may need to go back there at some point in time just to stay out of it. We had a secure scene.
The next day, detectives speak with Sarah Powell to confirm John's alibi.
She revealed to me that, yes, I was with John Schmeier yesterday. She had been with him for lunch at a restaurant where they were discussing online trading, that John experimented with that, and he enjoyed doing it, and she was looking to get involved in it to try to make some extra money.
Sarah and her fiance knew John Schmeier from a group that met frequently at a local restaurant.
John had started meeting with a group of people at Hooters restaurant. Sometimes a few times a month, they jokingly referred to themselves as the Orange Shorts Society, or OSS.
It was a place where they would go and just hang out and, drink beer and eat wings.
After their meeting, John and Sarah had met up with the larger OSS group.
When I asked her who all was there, she was able to provide information that matched John's as far as who all was present that day.
Investigators tracked down the rest of the OSS members at the meeting, and each one of them echoes John and Sarah's story. But they also share something else about John's relationship with Monica.
At these OSS meetings, John would say that he was frustrated with her and he was trying to move on with his life, but yet Monica was always there in his business.
Even though his alibi is confirmed, John appears to have a clear motive for murder, which makes him suspicious to police. So they ask him to take a lie detector test.
John submitted to a polygraph examination. John's polygraph was inconclusive, which means that we were unable to determine whether he was being truthful or not.
The test results have police mulling over a new theory.
Well, if John has an alibi, well, then maybe there's something else going on here that we need to look into. Theoretically, what if he paid somebody to kill her? We started really looking at John as far as, a murder for hire, that theory.
There was money involved, and certainly divorces can be acrimonious. He certainly was somebody they continued to look at.
Detective suspicions about John are stoked yet again when they get a troubling call from Monica's brother, Eric.
I told them that John comes to the door at about 5, 6 o'clock in the morning. And then John went into explaining that he went to Monica's house. John was not supposed to go to the house. He was told not to go there. He went there anyway.
Now that set a bell off for us. What the hell's going on here?
Detectives are eyeing John Schmeier in the murder case of his wife, Monica, after learning that he returned to the crime scene just hours after being questioned by police.
We learned from Eric, Monica's brother, that John Schmeier disregarded what we had asked him and actually went to the scene to see what had happened and gone into the house, had looked around, had walked around.
John's behavior is not only suspicious, but could have damaged the investigation.
Anything further that we wanted to do there had been jeopardized because the scene was no longer secure at that point. With John not following our request, it's another arrow in our quiver as far as, the person of interest, just another little check mark.
The day after the murder, police canvassed the neighborhood around Monica's home.
Patrol officers went out and spoke with neighbors, were able to locate people that saw something suspicious that was out of the ordinary the afternoon of March 31st. The first witness Patrol located was Mr. Kegerice. He lives up the hill from Monica Schmeier. Mr. Kegerice advised that the afternoon of March 31st, he noticed a gentleman coming down the hill. And he said it was kind of unusual. He'd never seen the guy before that afternoon. He sees this same gentleman now walking with a purpose, is how he describes it, back up the hill with what he believes to be a white envelope in his hand. So now we're putting 2 to 2 together. Oh, white envelope. We had white envelopes in the house. Those white envelopes contain cash. Why is this guy in the middle of nowhere, then comes back, and now he has an envelope, and he's walking with a purpose? Patrol also located a second witness, Mr. Crawford, who lived a little further up the hill. And Mr. Crawford was able to tell us that he was coming up the road from the Schmeier residence, and he noticed a gentleman walking up the roadway, which was unusual because there's not a lot of foot traffic out where these guys live. And Mr. Crawford also said you can see up the hill a silver van. And he describes it as a work van. It's not a soccer mom van. It's just your regular panel work van. Patrol was able to locate some tire tracks in the grass where that van, you could see where it did like a 3-point turn, turned around and went back up the hill. So now we have a direction of travel.
Investigators conclude the van headed towards a village called Jefferson.
In Jefferson, there's a bank. Now that bank has a camera that's facing out. So what we figured was, well, we'll get a search warrant, we'll grab the bank video as well as an ATM for March 31st. If the suspect had made a left, he goes towards Jefferson. If he makes a right, he goes to Maryland. We have a 50-50 shot, whether or not we got this van.
Investigators keep their fingers crossed as they comb through the poor quality video.
And I looked through all this video looking for silver vans, and I was able to find numerous silver vans that were coming through and going back on that day. We were looking for a needle in a haystack. We had a van. We now had, a possible suspect. We had the white envelopes. We had, all this information, but yet we still were getting nowhere.
3 days after the murder, investigators get the autopsy report, which they hope can help shed some light on the circumstances of Monica's death.
Miss Schmeier had been murdered with a single gunshot wound to the head right above her eye. What also was found was she had a lot of trauma to the right side of her face and her cheek and lips area, indicating that there had been a struggle.
I told them that Monica would fight. Monica had no fear. She had no fear of death. Monica did not care. She would go after the guy and scratched him. When I told the police that, they checked for DNA under their fingernails.
The fingernail scrapings, we sent them off to the forensic lab for analysis for DNA.
While they wait for the results, detectives focus on anyone Monica would have trusted to come to the house.
We had information from Eric, Monica's brother, that Monica had a handyman that would take care of things for her.
He lived a pretty good distance from her house. He would come down and did a lot of work for her, trimming trees and stuff. He did come often, and he didn't charge her for anything. That did seem suspicious to us at the time, and we kind of thought there might have been a relationship there.
Now, this handyman was married, but yet he spent a lot of time with Monica. As an investigator, you look at who normally kills you. It's someone you know, someone you have a relationship with. There's a thin line between love and hate, and that's where, our suspicions were, okay, well then maybe there's something else going on here that we need to look into.
Detectives investigating the homicide of 55-year-old Monica Schmeier have learned that Monica may have had a relationship with a handyman who did work for her around the house.
He would cut her grass, would do odd jobs around the house, take care of things for her. And she would often be seen like having lunch with him, or there was a relationship there. Now, we didn't know how strong that relationship or how intimate that relationship was.
Monica's brother, Eric, can offer investigators little insight into his sister's recent personal life.
In the beginning, we visited often, and then John left. Even though she was my next door neighbor, she became isolated from me, and in a way I didn't know what was going on.
Detectives asked the handyman to come down to the station for an interview.
When we asked him where he was at the time of the murder, he told the investigator that he had been working at a residence within a gated community in Adams County, about 40 miles away.
Unwilling to take him at his word, detectives check into his alibi.
We were able to substantiate that based off of the gate log as well as the video that was there that showed him coming in early in the morning and leaving after the 911 call would have been placed. So we were able to eliminate him as a possible person of interest in this investigation.
With the handyman in the clear, detectives are running out of possible suspects.
We looked at everyone. We looked at the UPS driver who delivered a package that day. We looked at the mailman. We looked at the exterminator. We looked at people that she knew from the dry cleaners. Anywhere we could find information about Mrs. Schmeier, we talked to those people because we were at wit's end as far as who could have done this and why would they have done it.
The passing weeks start to take an emotional toll on Monica's friends and family.
Everybody back home is waiting for something to happen, something. And then I got to the point, and I think the rest of the family, it's just going to be one of those things. You know, we're just going to, the guy maybe gets away with it or whatever.
Just seemed as if they were never going to solve it. And I think people were concerned, what if it was random? Because if it was random, it can happen again.
A month into the investigation, Detective Damagon decides to take a fresh look at all the evidence they have so far.
I was sitting at my desk in my office, and I have my notepad, and I'm going through all my notes from the scene.
The investigators circle back to Monica's ex, John, and his friends at the Orange Short Society.
I'm flipping through my notebook, and I get to my interview with Sarah Powell. Reading that, going back through that.
Fellow Orange Short Society member Sarah Powell had confirmed John's alibi. But now another detail suddenly jumps out to the detective.
And immediately, a light bulb goes off, and I recall, Sarah Powell telling me, my fiance is usually there, but he wasn't yesterday.
Sarah's fiance, Timothy Jacoby, is also a member of the Orange Short Society. But because he was unable to confirm John's alibi on the day of the murder, he had been off investigators' radar until now.
Come to find out, he has a master's degree, he's college educated, he's a U.S. Air Force veteran. He made, better than average money.
But when police search Timothy's name in their database, they make an alarming discovery.
He had a prior arrest for a robbery of a jewelry store involving a firearm.
Scooped up, I think it was close to $48,000 worth of jewelry. Turned around and ran out and dropped all the loot as he was running. They still caught him. He served prison time for that.
An ex-con who's friends with John Schmeier. The discovery reignites detectives' murder-for-hire theory.
We're lacking the nexus between Tim and Monica, and that's where the investigation kind of pivots to John Schmeier again.
Clearly he didn't do it himself, but he could have paid someone to do it.
Detective suspicions intensify when they check John's phone records.
In John's cell phone records, we found a phone call the day of the murder from John to Tim Jacoby. And I'm like, oh my God. It was like an aha moment for me. So all this is beginning to fit together. We had information from Eric, Monica's brother, that Monica had stated at some point in time that if anything ever happens to me, John did it. So we were looking, did John Schmeier and Tim Jacoby conspire to kill Monica Schmeier?
When police discover that John Schmeier's friend, Timothy Jacoby, is a convicted felon, they wonder if Schmeier may have commissioned him to murder his wife, Monica.
I run him for firearms, and what does he own? A Kel-Tec 32 automatic, which is one of the manufacturers we're looking for. So again, another flag goes up. Now we got to tie him to a van.
Was Jacoby the man witnesses saw driving the silver van close to Monica's house around the time of the murder?
But the problem we're seeing now is he doesn't own a van. We then identified where he worked, and he has access to a silver work van that they sign out on a calendar. You just go in and you check the calendar. If it's available, you put your initials in there, and on Tuesday you get the van.
Investigators asked for the company's logbook to see if Timothy had the van when Monica was killed.
We're going through it, and wouldn't you know it, there's only 11 months there. And the 1 month is missing is March 31st. It's the date of the murder. Once we found that Tim Jacoby had access to a van, we checked that bank surveillance video, and we were able to locate a van that's the same make and model as the one that Tim Jacoby had access to, coming out a route that would lead someone towards Tim's home.
The evidence piling up against Jacoby is compelling, but detectives will need something more concrete if they're to file charges.
We make the decision we're going to hit Tim's house with a search warrant. Tim did not say one word. Not why are you guys here, what's going on, nothing. Silence, other than a smirk on his face.
The search quickly uncovers damning evidence.
We found a firearm that had been stolen in a burglary in Florida some years before. So Tim, being a felon, he was not to possess any kind of firearm, and he was currently on parole, so we charged him with possession of a firearm as well as receiving stolen property. His parole was violated, and he was put in jail.
In addition to the stolen gun, investigators find a strange piece of evidence that leaves them scratching their heads.
In a detached shed that was on the property, we found a small barrel about, that long, maybe 2.5 inches long. And it appeared to me that it was consistent with a 32 or a small caliber firearm barrel.
Could this barrel be part of the murder weapon? While it's sent to the lab for analysis, detectives have some questions for Jacoby. But Jacoby isn't interested in talking.
Tim invoked his right to counsel, advised that he didn't have anything to say, and that he wanted his attorney present.
While Jacoby stonewalls, detectives question his fiancée.
When we interviewed Sarah denied any involvement to the point where she was physically upset. I then further inquired with Sarah if she'd ever seen this small black firearm that would fit in like the palm of my hand, a 32 ACP firearm to match the shell casing we found at the scene. And she said yes, that she had been with Tim when he had shot it. and she advised that it was at Tim's parents' place on a covered porch that's behind their farm, and they would shoot up towards a field.
Police quickly file a search warrant and begin scouring Tim's parents' property, starting with the house.
We found the box for a .32 ACP firearm, but we didn't find the gun. I went out back looking in the grass trying to find, a shell casing, something that's going to help us. We didn't find anything.
To connect Tim to Monica's murder, detectives need to find the gun or the shell casings that match the ones found at the crime scene.
At that point, I'm standing on the decking of this porch, and I look down. The boards are spaced in a way that they're, maybe a ½ inch to 3/4 of an inch apart. Light bulb goes off. I look at these two guys and said, "Did anybody go underneath?" And they said, "I don't think so." And I'll never forget, I'm standing there. They weren't underneath the platform for, 30 seconds. And the one officer says, "Are you looking for a .32? And I said, "Man, don't screw with me like that." And he goes, "Here you go." And he holds one out from underneath the porch. He goes, "Oh, here's another one. Here's another one. Here's another one." The shell casings we found at the Jacoby farm were matched up with the shell casing from the murder scene. The gun that fired the shot that killed Monica Schmeier is the same gun that fired those rounds that we found at the farm.
But before detectives could bring murder charges against him, one question was crucial to their case. Why would Tim Jacoby kill Monica Schmeier?
Police determined that he had never met Monica, had nothing against Monica, and the only way he knew her was through her husband.
To detectives, it was looking more and more like Tim didn't act alone.
John's alibi was airtight in the sense that he could not have physically committed that crime. However, that didn't clear him with police, because certainly he could have hired Tim Jacoby.
Anxious to get the truth once and for all, detectives confront the man they've suspected all along.
I went down to Virginia, where Dr. Schmeier was now residing, because we were not 100% sure that John didn't have anything to do with the homicide.
Police have strong evidence implicating Tim Jacoby in the murder of Monica Schmeier. But they suspect that Monica's ex-husband, John, may have ordered the hit.
We've identified Tim Jacoby as a suspect, but now we need a motive. Well, how does Tim Jacoby know Monica Schmeier? Because he doesn't know her, but he knows John. Did John Schmeier and Tim Jacoby conspire to kill Monica Schmeier?
John and Tim would socialize together. According to John, that's where Tim learned about Monica and the envelopes of money.
When we questioned him further, he said Tim knew that Monica would have cash at the house because that's what John told everyone. He knew that Monica lived by herself because that's what John told everyone. Tim Jacoby took that information and he devised in his mind the perfect crime.
It's a plausible motive. Still, to test the theory that John may have paid Tim to carry out the murder, detectives searched the financial records of both men.
We're trying to find any kind of financial connection between John and Tim. We left no stone unturned. We were finding nothing.
Yet detectives know that John had placed a call to Jacoby on the day of the murder.
When we inquired with John about why this phone call had been made, he related that, he had called Tim to let him know that he was meeting with Sarah because he didn't want Tim to think there was some kind of relationship between them or that John was trying to formulate a relationship with Sarah.
Without any evidence to implicate John in his wife's murder, detectives finally clear him as a suspect.
I believe that John, as quirky as he may be, had nothing to do with the homicide of Monica Schmeier. No one other than Tim Jacoby committed this crime.
On October 9th, 2012, Timothy Jacoby is charged with first-degree murder.
Someone she had never met that John knew. The whole thing was just surreal.
2 years later, the case goes to trial, and prosecutors lay out how they believe Monica's murder unfolded.
We believe that afternoon, Tim signed out the van in Lancaster County. He came across, parked the van, walked up to the home, whether he knocked on the door or he rushed the house, whatever. He overtook Monica, whether it was by surprise or by force. At some point, she made a run for the phone, at which point she brought the phone up to make the call, and she was shot.
Worried police are on their way, Jacoby panics.
Tim, in haste, grabs what he sees on the counter, walking with a purpose, with an envelope in his hand, and leaves.
Jacoby tries to cover his tracks by tampering with the logbook and murder weapon.
It showed that Jacoby was trying to erase every bit of evidence that might tie him to this crime.
So far, the evidence is circumstantial. So prosecutors turn to the results of a specialist YSTR DNA test.
A YSTR tests for specifically the male Y chromosome. They ran the YSTR test on the fingernail scrapings of Monica Schmeier, and they found a complete Y profile of the male Jacoby lineage. We eliminated his brothers and his father as having anything to do with it based off of alibis, other circumstantial evidence.
On October 8th, 2014, the jury finds Jacoby guilty of first-degree murder, burglary, tampering with physical evidence, and robbery.
Ultimately, Tim was sentenced to death. That's justice in my eyes.
Maybe there was a sense of relief and closure with the family, but for me, that pales in the fact that my sister's dead. I want people to remember Monica as a dedicated Catholic, someone who was dedicated to her family. I don't know anybody that was more dedicated to her family and to God. She was unbelievable.
For more information on an unexpected killer, go to oxygen.com.
I'd never heard anybody say a wrong word about her.
Didn't seem to me like she's got any enemies in the world.
Cheshire Fire and Rescue received a call of multiple fires at the property.
News of a devastating fire in the Cheshire countryside.
Once those fires had died down, there was no sign of her.
Where is the owner, and are they safe? When the deceased is found, clearly the state of the body, how it's been found, clearly a murder from the off.
I can't believe anybody would treat Diane like that.
Police believe she was murdered and then her home.
In the middle of the Cheshire countryside lies a quiet, quaint hamlet. Cranage.
It's quite an affluent area in parts. There's some big houses. There's a lot of farms around there, quite isolated at parts. Dairy farms, chicken farms. As well as being quite small, there's obviously the classic community feel towards it, whereby everybody knows everyone, and that's pretty much central to a place like Cranage.
The area is a really desirable place to live. I mean, a lot of people with a lot of money want to come and share what we've got out here. You know, we've got quite a lot of famous footballers in the area.
It's a lovely area, and it's just a nice area to live.
In the heart of the village sits Parklands Cattery, run by popular local Diana Lee.
Diane was a lovely girl that would always help people out. Very, very conscientious, very bright. You never saw her without a smile on her face. She was always very bubbly and just a lovely person. I'd never heard anybody say a wrong word about her.
She was always such a lovely lady, very full of the joys of spring, and didn't seem to me like she's got any enemies in the world. You know, she's that type of really likeable person.
Originally from Tabley, Diana moved to Cranage in 2008 and opened her own cattery business. And it thrived.
Diana opened the business with an ex-partner at the property and been quite successful in doing so. That partner then left that business, and she continued to run the cattery on her own.
But Parklands wasn't just any cattery. It was the creme de la creme of the feline world.
She loved cats, and that's why she created the business that she did do, which was probably a little bit unique to Cheshire and this environment. So offering TVs and beds, sort of prices that probably slightly higher than maybe other areas of the country. So yeah, I mean, that showed probably her caring side more than anything else.
I think anybody that wanted to trust anybody with an animal, you'd only have to be in the presence of Diane for a few minutes and you'd soon be contented the mind that your animal would be in safe hands and well looked after, well cared for, because she's just that caring nature.
A large gated detached property next door to her cattery. But she didn't live alone.
Being a big property at Parklands, Diana had a lodger who lived with her at that time, probably a bit of company, and also to help with the income coming in and to upkeep such a large property and the business as well.
On the 8th of August 2012, Diana meets friends for dinner, something which she often does in her spare time.
Diana met up with some friends in Knutsford at the Man's End Chinese restaurant on King Street, where she spent the evening with them.
She got a lot of friends, Diane had, and she'd be out with different groups of friends quite a lot.
But little does Diana know, that evening with friends is to change life forever and leave a lasting scar on the close-knit community.
11 a.m, Cheshire Fire and Rescue received a call of multiple fires at a property in Cranage.
This scene was discovered through a family relative going to the address. They go to the house, they see fire coming from, smoke coming from the house and the garage. A neighbour was alerted who rang the fire brigade.
Emergency services arrive and work tirelessly to put out the fire.
Once those fires had died down and they'd been treated with, they'd realised that Diana's car wasn't at the property and there was no sign of her.
That's the main concern for the police, would be where is the owner and are they safe? The police have got a report of a fire. You've got a relative who's turned up who can't find the owner. Clearly there's a number of seats of fire. Straight away you'd be thinking there's something suspicious regarding this, particularly if you're looking at an affluent property like we've got here.
The fire experts are going to be looking at whether it's a deliberately set fire, whether it appears to be an electrical fire, whether it's potentially a chip pan that's gone over, and as soon as the idea that a fire has been deliberately set, everyone's mind goes into very suspicious.
Fire officers keep searching the property grounds and enter the adjacent garage. And what they find changes the course of the investigation.
They found her body at the property, and at that point, police were called to investigate.
When Diana's body was discovered, the most obvious thing that would be clear to the first attenders is that the body was, certainly on the surface, badly burnt. That raises a whole number of possible scenarios. An accident, misadventure.
Cheshire police immediately arrive at the scene.
In the time I've served in the police as an investigator, I've been involved with many inquiries. The early priorities are the scene, first scene where the victim is.
But it's where Diana's body is that raises suspicion. She is found lying face down on a wheelbarrow. She is naked, covered in shredded paper and bedding. Her body battered with horrific injuries.
When the deceased is found, clearly the state of the body, how it's been found, is clearly a murder from the off.
Police believe the extent of the injuries are not just caused by the fire, so a murder investigation is launched.
The most important thing is to preserve the scene. The slightest disturbance of a scene, by trampling through it, walking through it innocently, it causes contamination. So it's really, really important to make sure that it's cordoned off.
You only get one go at recovering evidence from a body, and one that is already compromised. There will be a lot of discussion about what should be sampled at the scene, what should be done at the scene, what is going to be compromised by another action. So there will be a lot of effort going into preserving as much evidence as possible.
News of the shocking crime spreads quickly through the close-knit community.
I can't believe anybody would treat Diane like that and do so much harm. It just seems horrendous. I just can't comprehend it.
In the quiet, quaint village of Cranage, the community is shocked at the news of a murder. But the previous evening, August 8th, started off like a normal night out for 54-year-old Diana Lee. At 8 p.m, Diana met up with friends and had dinner in a local Chinese restaurant. According to friends, she said goodbye to them at 10:15 p.m. before driving home. Early the following morning, Diana sent a text to a friend.
Diana's phone records on the morning of her death showed that she'd texted a friend saying she wasn't feeling very well, she's feeling sick, and that she'd like her to collect a cat later in the day.
But just a few hours later, her property was engulfed in flames.
Fire brigade and the police attend, and they find the horrible scene in the garage of the victim.
She was found dead in her home, and police had opened a murder investigation.
News of the horrific attack quickly spreads.
A call came through from a contact who had been driving past the area saying there was lots of activity in Cranage itself, so we decided to come down. When we came down here, there was essentially fire, pumps, as well as emergency services, police and ambulance as well. Whenever you have a scene of maybe 3 or 4 police vehicles and 4 fire engines, you know that something's pretty serious. The tape was quite high up. They'd sort of cordoned off here, and it was difficult to get any closer than this, really. But obviously, there's lots of residents coming down here, trying to find out what had been taking place.
And the quiet village of Cranage is now the centre of an atrocious crime, and fear spreads that there's a killer on the loose.
The feeling in the community was just of absolute shock, a disbelief that, I mean, things like murders don't happen around here.
I mean, I think from the outset it was shock more than anything, and for it to happen for these residents on what is their doorstep was probably a big shock to them.
The fears for a community is who would do such an awful crime and they're still out there. Could they strike again?
There was a real lack of understanding of that somebody could do this.
The question crossing the community's mind: who could have murdered Diana, and why?
Certainly, any murder, there's rumour and speculation about the victim and possible the motive for a murder or who could have done it.
Some murders are spontaneous, a lot of it is finance, so you'd be looking at straight away what the lady does for a living, is the money owed, has it just been a random targeted attack by some local or someone travelling?
Police need to act fast, so they search the house. But they quickly come across a startling piece of evidence.
There was evidence of a victim's clothing in the lodger's bedroom and also a blood-stained knife which belonged to the lodger. So he's got access to the house, he's got access to the garage. He may have been in a relationship with this lady. So you've got to treat that individual as a suspect. You would have to arrest them.
With such obvious evidence potentially linking the lodger to the crime, police need to establish his movements in the hours Diana was last seen alive.
From their point of view, it's a case of trying to find out their background, where they were at the time of the incident, what they'd been up to, trying to find all sorts of reasons why they could have committed a crime such as this one.
The lodger tells detectives that he last saw Diana at 7:30 p.m. in the garden before she left in her car to have dinner with friends in Knutsford. He goes on to say that he left for work at 6 a.m. and remembers seeing Diana's car parked on the driveway. While police unpick the lodger's alibi to see if it stacks up, the team on the ground make a breakthrough discovery.
They found that Diana's car had been abandoned 10 miles away in Mobley. At that point, they'd also had reports from a taxi driver who had seen a man acting suspicious in the area, who'd also tried to torch the vehicle before running off.
A witness came forward, a taxi driver, to say that he'd seen someone trying to set fire to the car. He challenged the driver, and the driver made off on a bike, and then he's made off on field. So again, the push bike would be a scene, and there'd be searches going around that area.
Was this man Diana's lodger? And had he driven Diana's car 10 miles north? But while police gather evidence, another arrest is made.
There was a person who was known to Diana, who'd been an ex-partner, who had been convicted previously of a charge against her. He had convictions against Diana in terms of beating her.
There were two immediate suspects, two men who were in her life. So there was a lodger, and there was some circumstantial evidence that suggested that he was not all he said he was. And then there was a very violent ex who had actually been imprisoned for attacking her. So two quite strong suspects.
But police are soon able to confirm Diana's lodger was at work the entire day from 6 a.m, hours before the fire had started. He is released without charge. And with the items of evidence found in his room, detectives now suspect the lodger was set up for murder. But by who? With Diana's ex still in custody, police take a more in-depth look at him and his whereabouts.
The large proportion of domestic murders is sometimes it's an ex-partner. Clearly the ex-partner was a prime suspect very early on. The motive is he knows the victim, it's previous violent history towards the victim, so straight away you'd be alarm bells going.
We were all pretty convinced who'd actually done this.
The local community recalled Diana had once lived a life in fear from her ex.
Somebody that she'd known was banned from being in the area, and she knew that he'd been at the house. Certain things had moved, and she was petrified. And she gave me a call, and I went down to have a look to see if there was anybody there. I'd never seen anybody so petrified.
And the location of Diana's car further cements police suspicions. It was dumped between her house and that of her ex's.
For the investigating officers, realised that the car had been found in a location that was en route to the person, so it probably made sense in their minds that, again, he was the person who'd committed this crime.
Questioning of Diana's ex intensifies.
Is he still in contact? Where does he live? What were his movements for the day or the time of the murder, to eliminate them from the inquiry?
So after a couple of days of speaking to the person who they'd arrested, it quickly became apparent that that individual had a solid alibi.
With his whereabouts on the night of Diana's murder confirmed, her ex-partner is released. Having followed strong leads and had 2 potential suspects, detectives are back to square one.
It was a case whereby the police had to reappeal for information. It was a case of them having come across a bit of a dead end and having to start again to see who had committed this crime.
But post-mortem results come in and help police identify the cause of her death. Could this provide further clues to her attacker?
If somebody has died before a fire, then you will sometimes see soot in the mouth, you will sometimes see it as far as the larynx. But to get it down into the lungs, somebody has to be breathing. Answer that vital question: was this person alive when the fire was burning? And you'll be seeing that she hasn't inhaled soot. She hasn't inhaled the products of combustion. All of this is pointing to her being dead and then set alight, rather than either a deliberate act by herself or some sort of strange accident with solvents. She died of head injuries, so there was clear evidence of bleeding in the head resulting from impacts. That is very different to what you see if there's simply damage to the head from it being heated in a fire.
Police now know Diana died before her lifeless body was dumped and the garage set alight, meaning the killer tried to cover his tracks.
DNA will be damaged by the heat that the fire produces, but certainly trace evidence, if one looks hard enough, it can be recovered.
Forensics locate a small amount of unknown DNA on Diana. And there's something else.
There's no self-defense wounds. That information from the pathologist would clearly indicate generally that she knew the person was there with consent in the property, and that they weren't expecting that trauma to be caused to them.
Detectives now believe Diana's killer was known to her, so need to delve into her private life and turn to the community for help.
Community is key to any murder inquiry because they're the eyes and ears, and they probably hold evidence what they don't know at the time.
I get the feeling, as you do in so many of these cases, that Diana was actually quite a vulnerable person. She was living alone. She was probably fairly happy, having come out of an abusive and violent relationship. She was building things up again.
Maybe the situation has arose where she was probably too trusting of somebody.
Friends express their concerns that perhaps all was not as it seemed in Diana's life.
I should imagine she was easily taken advantage of in a financial way, because she was quite a wealthy lady. A few times when I saw her passing, she seemed like very troubled, as though she wasn't her usual self, and she was obviously hiding something that she was really concerned about, but she never really told me the full extent of it, and that was a bit of a worry for me, you know, what was going on with her. But I think most people would have realised something was not quite right, but because she was a private person, she didn't really explain to me exactly what was going on. And I just said to her, if you ever have any problems, you must report things if there's something you need to report. But she wouldn't tell me anything in detail or anything.
With those close to Diana unable to shed light on her private life, the investigation intensifies and police expand their search, trawling through local businesses and residential CCTV on the night Diana was last seen alive.
CCTV is huge on any major incident and murder inquiry, whether it's from the local council's CCTV, the police ANPR cameras, and then people's own CCTV from shops, businesses and private CCTV. A lot of the houses in this area will have their own CCTV, and if you get a fleeting glance of a vehicle or a person, that is key to an inquiry to identify people who have been at the scene.
So for the police officers investigating this case, they had a bit of a break when they found the CCTV footage on King Street of Diana leaving the restaurant, but at the same time they were left slightly puzzled by her movements, which were caught on an ANPR camera, which saw her headed away from her home address in Cranage and towards the Altrincham area of Greater Manchester.
What the police couldn't account for is about 45 minutes in between her leaving her friends and arriving home. So that gap in time was something that the police really needed to find out. Where was she going? Who was she seeing? Who was she meeting? That 45 minutes for the police would have been absolutely crucial because nobody could explain where she'd gone, so there was something in Diana's life that the police didn't know about.
With this latest piece of information, police looked closely at Diana's phone records and noticed something suspicious.
So as the officers trawled through Diana's phone records, they found a number that she'd been communicating with on a regular occurrence but had stopped doing so in January of that year.
Is another suspect in their sights?
That number belonged to a David Ryan, who lived in Hale in Greater Manchester.
It's been several weeks since local Diana Lee was found murdered in her home in Cranage. Police have questioned and released 2 men known to Diana, and 13 days after her body was discovered, police released an e-fit.
The police issued an e-fit of someone who they wanted to speak to. That individual was a person who was with the Corsa, which was seen trying to set fire to it and then made off on a push bike. It's really important that people try and recall what they were doing that day at that time, because they may have seen that offender leaving the scene.
With officers waiting for tip-offs from members of the public following the release of the e-fit, and having eliminated 2 suspects that are known to Diana, detectives have also been trawling through Diana's phone and have traced a mysterious phone number. Could this be a 3rd suspect? And who is this David Ryan? And how is he connected to Diana?
So as part of the police investigation, the officers went to David Ryan's house in Hale in Greater Manchester. They asked him how he knew Diana. He said in 2010 he had met her at a dancing club in nearby Bowden. He said that he had not met her since, and that was the only occasion when he had seen her.
He gives an account that he knew the lady, not well, but he knew her. He met her about 2 years ago at a local dance club, and that was it really, nothing intimate, that he just knew her as a fleeting acquaintance, and that's all he gave to the police.
At this point, officers took a DNA swab of his mouth just to eliminate him from their inquiries.
Despite this latest lead, police still have no suspect. So detectives start looking deeper into Diana's digital footprint.
One of the things they looked at was her financial transactions, and it was noted that were large sums of money missing or that couldn't be traced.
And officers at Cheshire Police found a substantial amount of money that had been withdrawn by Diana, I think circa £60,000, whereby they had no idea where that money had gone. Straight away, that gave them the lead in terms of trying to find out who that money had gone to.
The large withdrawals ring alarm bells for detectives, and there is no sign of where or who the money was transferred to. But with the investigation intensifying, suddenly police make an announcement.
A 47-year-old man has been arrested in connection with the murder of a Cranage businesswoman.
As the inquiry progressed on the 2nd of September, the police announced to the media that they've arrested a suspect for the murder of Diane Lee.
The man who's arrested is David Ryan, the man who Diana met at the dancing club in Bowden first in 2010.
It was a bit of a shock to us all, really.
It had only been 24 hours since David told detectives he had met Diana once. So how had he ended up in police custody?
The day after Mr. Ryan had been spoken to by the police and given his DNA sample, he called the police and said that he had further information, that he did know the victim, that he'd met the victim the night before the murder, and he'd had consensual sex in her car with him. So Mr. Ryan said that he was in a relationship with this lady. He'd been for some time. He'd done work at the house. He had a conservatory window glazing company that he'd done a lot of work at the house.
But why would David change his alibi?
There are lots of reasons why somebody would keep a relationship secret. You know, one of the reasons is that that person is in a marriage. You know, things need to be kept quiet.
Clearly his mind had been worrying about the DNA, that they'd taken the DNA sample and that he would be linked to the victims. So what he's done is he's tried to say that we would find his DNA once it had been examined, that he'd had sex with her the day before, that he knew her and he had sex with her in the car. But it doesn't automatically say that he's murdered her, but his DNA would be found on her.
Detectives acknowledged David's concern that his DNA would most likely be picked up on Diana from the night before. But they still need to rule him out as a suspect.
So the police will be doing a lot of work around this new suspect whilst he's in custody, of his background. The background showed that he was a failed businessman. He spent lots of money. He liked spending money. He was buying stuff, exotic items for himself, for his family. And that shows the sort of mentality of the individual. And then that clearly links to the problems financially. He was bankrupt, business-wise.
They found he was in a huge amount of debt. His business, which was a window and door conservatory business, had collapsed in June 2012. It was quite clear that he was struggling for money.
David's money issues raised suspicion. On one hand, he was bankrupt. On the other, he was spending large amounts. And he'd been in a secret relationship with Diana, whose own bank accounts recently showed large amounts of money vanishing.
Throughout that, there was instances of spending which didn't tally with what he had.
So you're building the picture of someone who's will probably go to any means to try and support himself financially, not do the basics in life of working hard and getting money, but to get it quickly.
Intense investigations into both Diana and David's financial transactions ensue, and it isn't long before a link is made.
The next stage was finding out that David Ryan had basically tricked Diana into investing tens of thousands of pounds of her own money into companies that just didn't exist. This has gone on for a period of time, and Diana had committed a large amount of money into these fake schemes.
Clearly, the victim was vulnerable in some respects, struck up a relationship with the offender. He would have thought probably she was a wealthy lady, she had money, he was in financial troubles, his business was going downhill, he owed money out, and she was probably a target for Mr. Ryan to take advantage of financially.
Forensic evidence is then uncovered, which appears to place David at the scene of the crime.
There was a footprint found at the scene of the murder in the victim's blood, so that would suggest and confirm that whoever was wearing that footwear was at the scene after the victim had been killed. And that footwear was the offender's footwear, Mr. Ryan, and the forensic evidence supported the fact that it was his footwear and couldn't have been no one else's.
And it appears David Ryan has been following the case closely.
Computer analysis of his computers at his house and his phone, and it was quite compelling evidence Circumstantially, that he'd been searching on Cheshire Police website about the murder, where the inquiry's up to.
Perhaps even aware time was running out.
Background checks by officers into Ryan's computer's history found that he'd searched for countries that had no extradition treaties with the UK.
Somalia was named, and a number of others. So clearly this is a man who wants to, or is thinking about leaving the country because he's done something wrong. This man is now trying a way out to disappear from the country, to get away from being arrested for this awful murder.
Police appear to have finally found their man. And by collating all their information on David, they piece together a timeline of a murder.
Diana had obviously left the Man's End restaurant in King Street in Knutsford.
And they know that her car was caught by the ANPR cameras driving away from her home.
From there, she'd gone to Hale in Manchester to see David Ryan in her car. She picked him up. They travelled back down to Cranage, whereby they spent the night. And then, obviously, in the early hours of the morning, for whatever happened and whatever reasons, Diana was murdered.
Having killed the person he's been having an affair with for almost 2 years, David then sets a scene.
So following the murder, Mr. Ryan decided to cover his tracks, planting evidence in the lodger's room, using a dagger, leaving it there that he'd used to commit the crime. He'd also then started to plant various fires around the house.
He tried to burn the body to try and get rid of forensic evidence.
The problem being that he found that where he'd started those fires, there wasn't enough oxygen for the fires to let hold. The fires just burnt themselves out, so they didn't have the effect that he wanted to. His plan, quite clearly, was to destroy the whole property, to make sure nothing was left, to make sure no evidence was left behind, so nothing could be traced back to him.
This was all about him getting away with it. This is about him walking away and leaving whatever behind him. This wasn't about anger. This wasn't about passion. This was, how do I get out of this? And can you imagine using that amount of violence just to get out of something?
The police had sufficient evidence to go to the CPS to charge Mr. Ryan with murder.
But what really went on that fateful morning? And what may have driven David to murder Diana?
The trial of a man from the Altrincham area accused of killing a Cranage businesswoman has begun. Diana Lee, who was 54, was found dead after a fire at her home last August.
It's been 10 months since Diana Lee was found murdered in her home in Cranage. And 48-year-old David Ryan faces trial for her murder at Chester Crown Court.
Heading into the trial for this crime, I would clearly be concerned of all the evidence we've got. Have we got sufficient evidence to convict him beyond all reasonable doubt for a jury to believe the prosecution case and it's watertight? The last thing you want to do is go to a trial and there be some error or some process we haven't done. The continuity evidence has been missed somewhere and it be brought up at a Crown Court trial.
Local reporter James Wilson recalls seeing Diana's killer in the flesh.
On the first day of the trial, it was a bit of a surprise to myself to see Mr. Ryan stood there. He probably wasn't what you would describe as a person who probably capable of committing this crime, essentially. He wasn't very big, looked quite meek, and he was obviously incredibly nervous as the proceedings were about to begin.
The prosecution begins by setting out its case to the jury.
The prosecution outlined a really strong case in their opening statement. They detailed where the DNA had been found in the property, including the bedroom and other parts of the house. Quite a lot was backed up by phone records and evidence of the ANPR cameras around the area. It was an incredibly strong case and probably quite surprising that Mr. Ryan at this point was still pleading not guilty.
The prosecution reveals to the court how David first responded to police.
I think police officers were quite taken aback by Ryan's reaction to the request for a DNA swab. He wasn't happy, he became quite agitated, and he suggested he didn't want to do it. It was only after persuasion by the officers involved that mouth swab was completed.
The prosecution reveals further evidence in relation to a text Diana sent.
The police searched details on her mobile phone records. They found out that text messages had been sent in the morning to her close friends saying she'd been unwell.
A simple text message, but one which immediately flagged suspicion among investigators. The text was sent early on the morning of 9th of August, when Diana was already dead.
An expert gave evidence at the trial to say that was unlikely to be the victim's text message by the language used in the text message. So sometimes we will use different experts in certain fields, and this expert would say that it wasn't the normal language used by the victim, but more likely to be used by the offender.
A linguistics expert tells the court that the style of the text message did not match Diana's typical style, but it did match David Ryan's. Despite hearing evidence linking David Ryan to the murder, the court hears he has no previous convictions. So what would lead him to commit such an atrocious crime? But as the trial unfolds, more information comes to light, hinting at a potential motive.
Obviously living in Hale, it's a very affluent suburb of Greater Manchester. Maybe from his point of view there was a pressure to keep that up. Maybe there was a pressure to keep up that pretense that he just couldn't do anymore.
This man was in financial dire straits. Now, that is one of the triggers that can cause big problems in a relationship. He may have feared that his wife was going to leave him because of these enormous debts. He may have gone out and looked for someone like Diana to be able to get some money to fix the other situation. I think he targeted Diana for money, and the reason I think that is because he spent all the money on his wife. He spent all the money on IVF treatments, on holidays, on things for his other family. He did not get invested in his relationship with Diana. So, no, I don't think he was in love with her.
He'd already taken a substantial amount of money from Diana on the premise of investing in things that just didn't exist.
But as it transpired, the deeper he got in, that was actually becoming a bigger threat to the other situation than perhaps even the finances were in the beginning.
Somewhere along the line, this man is living a lie. He's married, he's got a child, he's been in another relationship with someone secretly, and unfortunately all these things come to an end somewhere along the line. And in these circumstances, I would have thought in relation to the victim, she's gone to his house the night before the murder, she's collected him in her car, brought him back to her house.
Diana started asking questions about the investment. You know, the money that she'd given him, where was it? How was it doing? Was she going to get any back? She wasn't a rich woman. She couldn't just chuck this money away and think, oh, well, you win some, you lose some. And I think that he was under increasing pressure from her.
She was going to possibly tell someone, tell their wife, or go to the police to say, he's targeted me.
So was David trying to protect his wife from finding out about his affair and his conning Diana out of money?
And there's a stage where there's a trigger. He was more worried about his wife finding out and her maybe leaving him. He wants to protect the relationship with his wife, but we can't simplistically say that that is because he's so in love with his wife. It is far more likely that he gets his entire identity from the relationship he has with his wife. And if you took that away from him, you'd be taking everything.
After a grueling 7-week trial at Chester Crown Court, the jury returns its verdict. David Ryan is found guilty of Diana Lee's murder.
Conman David Ryan killed his wealthy lover after cheating her out of £60,000. Today, a jury in Chester found him guilty of murder.
He is sentenced to 34 years in prison.
There were shouts from the gallery from people connected to Diana who were obviously incredibly emotional at that time, hearing what they wanted to hear. Mr. Ryan was again pretty much motionless throughout this reading. There was no real reaction from him. I think probably he expected this verdict to come out, and again, he probably wasn't surprised deep down because he knew that he'd done this incredibly bad crime.
I think the most awful thing about this case is how dispensable Diana was to him. We all know she's a really, really lovely person. There's the lodger, who he doesn't know very well, but he's quite happy for both of those people to take the fall to protect his life. He has no empathy with their suffering or what's going to happen to them.
With David now behind bars, the local community look back and think why Diana, a successful and popular business owner, might have let a criminal into her life.
Diana didn't behave strangely when she gave the money to Ryan. She behaved in a way that any of us would have behaved in similar circumstances with the same information. She didn't hand over money to a person who she thought was dodgy or that she didn't like. She was taken in by him. She may have been lonely. She cared about him. She trusted him. We give money to people we trust. She wasn't a stupid woman. In hindsight, or from where we're sitting, we can say, I would never have done that. Well, I guarantee you, if you felt the way that she did, you might well have done.
It's just worrying, really, what can happen to you. And obviously happened to Diana, which is such a shame, because she was such a lovely lady.
Still in everybody's minds, still can't believe what's happened. It's just a tragedy.
For the residents of Cranage, she will never be forgotten.
A beloved father and devoted basketball coach.
Jimmy loved kids.
He loved to talk about coaching basketball and God.
Ruthlessly gunned down in his own home.
There were 10 shell casings. Whoever did this wanted to make sure that he was dead.
Leaving a whole community devastated.
I just started screaming. I literally just lost it.
Detectives follow evidence down a twisted trail.
It was what we call a whodunit. All the doors were locked to some fashion.
There was muddy footprints coming into the foyer area.
To uncover a number of suspects.
He immediately lawyered up. He didn't want to talk about anything.
He had just filed for divorce before he was killed.
Was there some sort of romantic thing gone awry?
And unveil a killer no one could have ever imagined.
They had no remorse, no confessions.
You saying that you killed him?
It shocked me very, very much. This could happen to anybody.
Cordova is a peaceful suburb just east of Memphis, Tennessee. Its wide open spaces and strong church communities make it a haven for families.
Cordova is one of those very safe neighborhoods. Kids riding up and down to the bikes. You honk at your neighbor and your neighbor waves.
It's not a place that we're accustomed to seeing violent crimes.
But in the winter of 2013, the town's carefree spirit is disrupted by a troubled call to police.
The initial call came on a Friday morning from the principal at Ridgeway High School.
Jimmy McLean had not reported to work. He was a school teacher and a basketball coach.
Jimmy was always punctual, so when he didn't show up for work, people immediately started worrying about Jimmy.
Our patrol officers go over there and they knocked on the door, nothing. The front door was locked, the back door was locked, the garage door was shut, all the windows were locked. Nothing appeared to be opened or broke. And then one officer was able to look in through some glass doors. And then he saw something that looked like a shell casing.
Immediately on alert, officers quickly force entry into the home.
As soon as they made entry, they saw a black male in the floor with a lot of blood around him, dead.
Homicide investigators are on the scene within minutes.
When I first arrived, we see a male victim laying in the den area of the house who appeared to have been shot multiple times.
Whoever did this wanted to make sure that he was dead.
Detectives find a wallet in the victim's pocket. The ID inside confirms this is 49-year-old Jimmy McLean.
The big thing that stood out at that time was the numerous shell casings that were scattered throughout the living portion of the residence.
There were 10 shell casings, and they were all the same caliber, 40 caliber, but they were 2 different brands. That puts a theory in your head. Was there 2 shooters, you know, one brand in one gun, one brand in the other, or was it just one shooter with mixed rounds?
Detectives can find no murder weapon at the scene, but something else grabs their attention.
There was muddy footprints coming into the foyer area, which we knew were not any of our officers' prints.
We were able to lift those prints.
I truly was hoping we could identify the type of shoe and the actual size of the shoe.
There were no signs of fingerprints to the naked eye, so we were able to swab the doorknobs, both interior and exterior on the front door, for the presence of DNA.
An exhaustive search of the house yields no sign of forced entry.
We had no signs of robbery, no signs of burglary. The big thing to me was all the doors were locked to some fashion, meaning someone locked the door on their way out upon leaving the scene. That told me that most likely our suspect had a key to the residence.
So once we realized that somebody had let themselves in, we're like, well, who's got access to these keys? Did Jimmy know the person who did this?
Detectives also attempt to discover the approximate time the murder happened.
We were able to find out there was a shots fired call that came in our dispatch around 8:50 p.m. 2 days before we found the body.
So started making sense real quick, though, that that's probably when this happened.
As police continue their investigation at the scene, Jimmy's sister, Easter, arrives.
To this day, that is the absolute worst day of my life. It's the day I came around the corner and saw yellow tape around my baby brother's house, who I love so dearly. The police asked me, "Ma'am, do you know who lives here?" I said, "My brother is my brother. Where's my brother?"
Officers confirm Easter's worst fears and tell her that her brother has been killed.
I just started screaming, just started just howling.
Detectives ask Easter and Jimmy's mother, Jamela, to come downtown. Through her tears, Easter tells detectives how young Jimmy grew up to be such a beloved figure.
We grew up in Eastern Arkansas. Jimmy is the 4th of 8 kids. He was intelligent, precocious, very athletic.
From a young age, Jimmy McLean had a passion for basketball.
Jimmy walked tall, slender, like a greyhound. It's real tight muscle, flexible, agile.
His nickname was Full Time because he never played half speed. He always played full speed, and that's how he took life.
Jimmy had played basketball with Scottie Pippen. Jimmy considered Scottie Pippen a friend, and I think it was likewise.
After 7 years of professional basketball, Jimmy took up coaching.
Jimmy loved teaching and mentoring. He just was a natural leader with youth.
Jimmy had found his calling, but one part of his life remained unfulfilled.
The thing that he talked to me the most about was his desire to be married.
In the late 1990s, Jimmy met the partner he'd always dreamed of. Her name was Carla.
He was very happy, very excited. He took his relationship very seriously. The next summer, they got married.
Jimmy also became a father to Carla's 2 children from a previous relationship, 16-year-old Tiffany and 11-year-old Dwayne.
He never had children, so he was looking forward to being a father. They all looked up to him as a mentor and as a father, and he spent a lot of time trying to be sure that they were on a good path. He talked to me a lot about the things he was going to do with Dwayne and Tiffany, and he especially wanted to involve Dwayne in summer basketball camps and so forth. He was very serious about being a good husband and a good father.
Together with Carla, Jimmy raised Dwayne and Tiffany as his own. But after 8 years of marriage, cracks started to show in their relationship.
Carla wanted the divorce at first. I do believe that the problems were related to something that occurred early on in their relationship.
Initially, Jimmy had resisted the idea.
I overheard Jimmy telling her that it doesn't make sense for us to be separated. There's nothing wrong, we're not having problems.
But eventually, Carla and Jimmy split up, and after 4 years of separation, Jimmy finally agreed to make it official.
I don't think I really got the full story about exactly what changed his mind and his heart toward her. But he had just filed for divorce a couple of weeks before he was killed.
Detectives are suspicious. Was the timing just a coincidence, or did Jimmy's looming divorce have something to do with his murder?
We immediately thought we need to talk to Carla.
Had Jimmy and Carla been in some sort of argument or confrontation?
Coming up, detectives unearth disturbing clues.
There had been a scandal at the high school.
Why are these numbers erased during the same time period as the homicide?
And the truth blindsides everyone.
We had found the needle in the haystack.
They had admitted to killing a basketball coach.
Police have just learned that Jimmy McClain filed for divorce 2 weeks before he was killed. And now detectives need to know if animosity between Jimmy and his soon-to-be ex-wife Carla could have been a motive for murder.
We had asked, Carla and Tiffany and Dwayne, her biological children, to come town.
Dwayne and Tiffany wait in the next room while police talk to Carla, starting with her relationship with Jimmy.
She says, look, we were going through a divorce, but it wasn't because he was doing anything bad. She said that we fell out of love.
Carla tells police that when she and Jimmy were married in 2001, Jimmy treated her kids, Dwayne and Tiffany, like they were his own. But as they grew into their late teens, Carla and Jimmy's parenting styles started to clash.
Carla did advise that Jimmy was really hard on her kids. Jimmy was very discipline-oriented, and she always took the side of the kids. In her eyes, they could do nothing wrong. She wasn't going to let Jimmy over-discipline. And some of the issues is what transformed into this growing away from each other.
Detectives ask Carla directly if she stands to gain from Jimmy's death.
She did advise that she had a life insurance policy through her work where Jimmy was on the policy and she would have been the beneficiary.
Was the life insurance payout a motive for Carla to kill Jimmy? Knowing evidence from the crime scene suggests the killer let themselves in. Detectives need to find out if Carla still had access to Jimmy's home.
We actually did ask Carla if she had a key to the house, and she did not have a key that she could remember.
Undeterred, they ask where Carla was on the night of the murder.
She didn't go out and do anything. She said it was raining that night. It was nasty weather. She actually went to her bedroom and read a book. We asked if anybody could verify that. She said, well, my son, Dwayne, because he was at home as well.
To confirm Carla's alibi, police bring in Dwayne and Tiffany, who are waiting in the next room.
When we saw Dwayne, he's a 19-year-old, kid. Dwayne gave a statement advising to us that, when his mom came home, that he just sat and chilled at the house. He didn't have a cell phone, so he would use his mom's. His mom said that she was down in his bedroom. He said he was up in his bedroom, and they didn't see each other the rest of the night.
Dwayne's account lines up with Carla's, but detectives are curious about whether Dwayne had any conflicts with Jimmy.
Tell me about Jimmy. How was y'all's relationship?
It was cool, but we bumped heads a little bit sometimes. He was straight up in the night. He was cool. He fun, loving person.
Dwayne just was like, I can't believe this happened. I don't know who would have done this.
Police turn their attention to his sister Tiffany, and right away sense some tension.
When we interviewed Tiffany, she admitted her and Jimmy butted heads on things, and she actually moved out. She didn't like being parented by him.
Detectives ask where she was at the time of the murder.
Advised she was at home with her boyfriend during the time frame all that Wednesday evening. So at the time we got through interviewing Carla, Tiffany, and Dwayne, there was not anything to lead us to believe that they had any involvement with the death of Jimmy.
To help confirm their alibis, detectives ask for Carla and Tiffany's cell phones.
We were going to use the technology of the cell phone pinging to corroborate where they were the night of the murder.
While they wait for those results, detectives canvass Jimmy's friends and colleagues to find out who else might have had a key to his house.
Early on in the investigation, we had to look at everything. With Jimmy being a high school teacher, with Jimmy being a basketball coach, there was multiple people that could have done this.
We had to start going back to who knew Jimmy. And the first thing we did was work. We spoke with all the teachers liked Jimmy, other coaches liked Jimmy, the principal liked Jimmy.
Detectives can find no one with a key or even a bad word to say about Jimmy.
He was the kindest, gentlest, most compassionate person that I know. But for somebody to snatch your loved one from you out of their own selfish reasons, it really is heartbreaking, and it makes you mad.
3 days into the investigation, detectives receive Jimmy's cell phone back from forensics and discover that he was texting shortly before he was killed.
He was texting with a female subject, and they were back and forth talking about some directions and basically good night. The last text we identified as a subject named Pam Smith.
The name is new to police, but when they compare the time of her last text with the report of gunshots on the night of the murder, they realize they were just minutes apart. With this new lead, Pam Smith becomes detectives' newest suspect. Who is she? And was she involved in Jimmy's murder?
When you read the text messages between her and Jimmy, the lingering question had to be, was there some sort of, romantic thing gone awry?
Detectives have just discovered that Jimmy McLean was texting with a woman named Pam Smith on the night he was murdered.
We were able to determine that Pam was the last person that Jimmy had contacted.
Investigators need to speak to Pam to see if she has any information that points to the killer.
We called just to say, this is the sheriff's office. Do you know Jimmy? And she was like, yeah, that's my boyfriend.
Detectives inform Pam of Jimmy's murder and carefully gauge her response.
She was extremely distraught. She was like, do I need to come down there? What do I need to do? We still had to figure out who she was. Is she married? Is there an affair situation? Is this a boyfriend, girlfriend situation?
Pam tells detectives that she and Jimmy had only been dating for 6 months.
We were able to sort of dig into the relationship between Pam and Jimmy, what seemed like a healthy relationship.
Pamela claims she was 3 hours away in Nashville at the time of the murder, and she's more than happy to turn over her phone so police can verify her statement.
After talking to her, I mean, there was nothing that she gave any kind of suspicion or anything.
Detectives have one more question for Pamela.
We actually did ask Pam if she had a key to the house, and she advised that she did not have a key.
But she says she knows who does.
Pam had overheard a phone call. Jimmy was telling his wife, Carla, that she could come by the house while he was gone to pick up some mail that had come to the house for her. Pam took note that when they left the house, Jimmy didn't leave the mail in the mailbox or on the front door, but he left it inside the house, which told Pam that Carla had a key to the house.
Police believe the killer had a key, but Carla told detectives she didn't have one. The discrepancy raises a red flag.
Is it possible that Carla had a key to the house? How can we prove that she didn't come into the house the night of the murder?
There's only one way to know for sure.
We used the technology of the cell phone pinging to follow her from her work all the way to home.
The cell phone data indicates Carla was home all night, and her daughter Tiffany was too.
Everybody's statements made sense where they were. There was no reason to pursue any other questions with them or Pam at that moment.
Before Carla and Tiffany can be completely ruled out, police must corroborate the calls and texts on their phones with the complete records from the cell companies.
And those can take several days, depending on the circumstance.
A week after the murder, Jimmy's loved ones pay their respects at his funeral.
Jimmy's funeral was held at a local Church of Christ, probably a couple thousand people there. Jimmy touched a lot of people.
Going to Jimmy's funeral was a tough process for myself. So many people loved him.
The mystery of who could have killed Jimmy is on everyone's mind, and grief-stricken loved ones are desperate for answers.
The family was very concerned, but I felt that absolutely the truth would come out.
It was hard waiting and hoping that they get that person before it's too late.
It's very frustrating. After several days, it gets worse. It gets harder to solve, and the family starts to lose hope in you.
The day after the funeral, detectives received the forensics reports.
There was no extra DNA under the fingernails of him to see if he got physically close enough to maybe grab the suspect or anything like that. We didn't get any fingerprints that weren't supposed to be there. Jimmy's prints were the only ones there.
The report isn't all bad news for detectives.
An expert at Nike was able to determine the muddy shoe prints in the entryway of the house. Most likely came from a Nike Air Force One.
These are basketball-type shoes. They're between the size 10 and 11.
Before detectives can follow up on this new lead, their investigation takes a bizarre twist.
There had been a scandal at the high school.
Ridgeway High School had a very good basketball team. They were one of the top in the state. We started hearing about a student at the school who had just recently gotten in some trouble.
Detectives need to know if the scandal is linked to Jimmy's murder. Staff tells them the player at the center of the storm is number 22, Mackenzie Sewell.
Obviously, he was a fairly good basketball player, but he was also 2 years older than people that he was playing with. He was actually an adult, falsified documents to still play high school basketball because he was attempting to try to get a scholarship to play.
A week after Jimmy is found dead, the scandal explodes into the headlines.
This man used a fake transcript to enroll here at Ridgeway High, and our sources tell us the man has a GED, but enrolled here simply so he could play basketball.
A humiliated Mackenzie is kicked off the team and out of Ridgeway High.
The dream of the NBA is over. The coaches were like, oh my goodness, because the whole school gets punished for it. They get disqualified from being able to play.
The scandal raises a key question for detectives. Had Jimmy discovered the truth about Mackenzie and been silenced before he could report him to authorities?
Did Jimmy initiate this whole situation? Because we knew Jimmy was an ethical individual. If Mackenzie thought Jimmy had anything to do with this, then this could be a reason why Jimmy was murdered.
Police are eager to talk to Mackenzie, but that's not going to happen.
He immediately lawyered up. He didn't want to talk about anything.
Detectives try a different approach. They go to speak with the person who registered him at Ridgeway High, his mother, Chandra Nicole. What she tells them is more bizarre than they could have imagined.
What we found out is that was his wife.
Detectives hunting the killer of high school basketball coach Jimmy McClain are investigating whether a scandal involving one of his players is linked to his death. Now they discovered that the player's mother is actually his wife. She admits to helping Mackenzie falsify his age, but says it wasn't Jimmy who had discovered the deception.
She had actually called in to say that he was falsifying records, that he wasn't supposed to be in the school because they had gotten into an argument.
While enjoying his second go-around in high school, Mackenzie began a relationship with a fellow student. When his wife caught wind of it, she told the school about Mackenzie's scam.
It was a domestic situation between him and the wife. Really didn't have anything to do with Jimmy. Didn't fall on Jimmy at all.
Once again, a promising lead evaporates into thin air. And over a week into the investigation, police are starting over.
I was back to square one again. I was starting to question myself and wonder, are we gonna get anywhere with this thing?
I was starting to be concerned. I wanted to know when people were gonna be charged.
Just as investigators begin to fear the trail growing cold, they receive the complete cell phone records for Jimmy's ex-wife, Carla, and her daughter, Tiffany.
We had ordered direct cell phone records to corroborate the exact records that we had initially dumped. You're talking hundreds, even thousands of records at times to look through, to see if you can find where there's a discrepancy in something.
After days of hard work, police get the break they've been praying for.
Everybody else's phones were making sense, but Carla's phone did not make sense. We noticed there were actually people being texted between 6 and 9, 2 different phone numbers. And that was the time frame of the homicide. Those texts were conveniently erased off Carla's phone. So that automatically piqued interest. So we were trying to identify the 2 phone numbers that were deleted. We identified one of them as a subject named Robert, and then another subject named Heather. We looked up Robert real quick and found out Robert was a convicted felon for dope dealing. But why are these numbers erased the night of the murder? At that point, I felt it necessary to call Carla back in and talk to her again, and then further identify maybe Heather and Robert since we had names on them.
When detectives press Carla about the texts, she tells them they belong to her son and Jimmy's former stepson, Dwayne. Detectives already know that Dwayne uses his mom's phone since he doesn't own one of his own.
Carla said that Heather was a girlfriend. She says, oh, she's a good girl. She's a girl that lives out in Cordova, not too far. Carla said wasn't too fond of Robert, but she did admit he and Dwayne were friends. She says, well, I don't really like him hanging out with Robert too much. You know, he's a troublemaker.
Knowing that Dwayne was texting with a known felon during the time frame of Jimmy's murder is a red flag for detectives. So they asked Dwayne to join his mom down at the station.
The way we approached Dwayne was like, hey, we're having to kind of start over and get a more detailed events of the night. And he advised when his mom got home, he had the phone, he spoke with one of his friends, and then Heather came over.
When detectives finish with Carla and Dwayne, they quickly contact Heather to see if she can confirm Dwayne's story.
She said, I went to Dwayne's house that evening, later that evening. So she has confirmed that she went over there.
It seems like it's another dead end. Yet when detectives follow up with a question about the basketball shoe print found at the crime scene, the interview takes a promising turn.
We asked about the shoes, and she said, oh, Dwayne has these Air Force Ones, and he wears a size 10.5, which fit the crime scene. And at that point, she said, and I remember seeing those Air Force Ones out on the porch, but I hadn't seen them since then. She said, I even have a picture of them. And when she showed a picture, it was a picture of Dwayne staying in the kitchen with a AR-15 rifle and these Air Force Ones.
Police quickly get a search warrant for Carla's home.
Searching the closets and everything else, so there's no Air Force Ones in there. There's no shoes that match the homicide. Took pictures of his room, and we left. We didn't come out at that house with anything.
So far, linking Dwayne to the crime has not proven fruitful, but detectives have another strategy.
We know for a fact that there was text messages between Robert and Dwayne during the homicide. We feel that those texts could be very important. Since he'd erased them off his phone, we couldn't get them. So my goal was to get a search warrant for Robert's phone, hoping that the text messages were still on his phone, visible where we could see them.
While police wait for a warrant to be approved, officers keep an eye on Robert.
I arrived, and within a few hours of setting up surveillance, Robert Collins came out of his house.
At that point, our detectives went to talk to him, and Robert took off running.
Detectives investigating the murder of Jimmy McClain believe text on the phone of convicted felon Robert Collins may point to the killer.
When Robert took off running, he ran a good ways, but we needed to catch him. We didn't want him to destroy his phone or anything like that.
As Robert Collins was running away from the scene, he tossed something.
Our detectives ended up catching him on foot, and when they did, he had a large amount of narcotics.
The illegal drugs give detectives reason to arrest Robert. But even more incriminating is what he tried to discard as he fled.
When we saw that he had tossed a weapon, we immediately thought maybe that was the weapon that was involved.
So in the back of my head, I'm thinking, oh, this is fantastic. Are we going to solve the homicide right now? You get excited, like, hey, we're there, we're going to get this.
Police bring Robert down to the station, but before they question him, they carefully examine his gun and phone.
I think it was very quickly determined it wasn't the weapon from the scene.
Still, detectives have plenty of leverage on Robert.
He's a felon convicted with a handgun. Now he's got another handgun on him and a large amount of drugs. This could easily go federal. Maybe that could help us out. Maybe he'd want to work something out. He wouldn't budge on anything. I don't want to talk to y'all. Basically, he said, just put me in a jail cell. I'll go do my time. You just don't get that. That's just not normal.
Is Robert trying to protect his buddy, Dwayne, or just himself? If he won't give anything up, detectives hope his cell phone might.
I was hoping that the text messages were still on his phone. Started going through it. Well, Robert had erased his text too. But what Robert didn't erase were some pictures that we were able to get. The day before the homicide, Robert on his phone had a picture of a handgun. It is a similar gun, a .40 caliber Smith & Wesson Sigma, the same caliber used. What was unique about the handgun was not the handgun itself, but where the handgun was laying. And it was laying on a very unique bedspread. When I saw the bedspread, I was like, I've seen that bedspread before. I said, go get the search warrant pictures from when we picked Dwayne up. Well, as we scrolled through more pictures, we finally found a deleted picture that had Dwayne in front of the bedspread. So it tied it all in with the gun in the picture.
Police now know the gun likely belonged to Dwayne or someone in his inner circle. But who used it to gun Jimmy down in cold blood? Detectives hope to find out from Robert himself.
So when we put Robert in jail, we were hoping Robert would say something on the phone. The first phone call that Robert made was to a young guy. First thing that Robert said to the guy was, hey man, that pit bull, it's real sick. And the guy kind of like, I don't think he caught what he was saying. He's like, oh yeah, just laughing, I got you. And Robert, you could see, was very frustrated. Like, no man, I'm not kidding. You need to get rid of that pit bull, it's sick. Bro, I shouldn't have sold it to you. We did have indication that pit bull was most likely the gun.
And real sick, put it in street terms, means it has a body on it.
Detectives trace the owner of the phone Robert called.
It was a kid named Jamarius that lived in the Cordova area.
We believe that Jamarius Cooper had in his possession the firearm that was used in the killing of Jimmy McClain.
Police get an emergency search warrant and race over to Jamarius' home before he can dispose of the gun.
When we got Jamarius Cooper's bedroom, we systematically started going through places that things could be hidden.
We were going through it and we weren't finding anything. And then one of my detectives, probably into the 30th box or so, he's like, I got something. And I was like, do what?
When I saw that gun, I immediately felt like we had found the needle in the haystack. We had known through this investigation that most likely we were looking for a very specific gun. That is the same style gun that we're looking for. Same caliber, most likely the same brand, the same model.
At that moment, I was like, Jimmy's here. He's guiding us. He's telling us it's all here. He's not making it easy. He's making this puzzle, but it's slowly coming together. So immediately took the gun and had TBI process it. Within a couple hours, they were calling us back on, hey, this is the gun that was used in the homicide of Jimmy McClain. That does bring some emotion to you. You're like, oh my gosh, this work, this time, and we're going into 30 days here. I mean, nobody finds a gun used in a homicide in 30 days.
Police need to talk to Jamarius, but before they can track him down, they get an alarming call.
We have a call from Cumberland County Sheriff's Office, and the deputy there said, hey, listen, we just had something weird come in. A white female came running into our station. She was very distraught. She was in her pajamas, and that she said that she wanted to pass on some information, that her husband was upset because his nephew had admitted to killing a basketball coach.
Detectives investigating the murder of Jimmy McClain have just received an unexpected call from a sheriff's office 5 hours away.
And the deputy there said a white female came running into our station. Her husband was upset because his nephew had admitted to killing a basketball coach. Her husband was Carla's brother, which was Dwayne's uncle.
Detectives are stunned. Dwayne's uncle is Donald Page, a known felon. Detectives bring him in, knowing they may only have one shot to get him to talk.
He was very, I'm not talking to you, I ain't got nothing to say.
Police remind him of one simple fact. If he's withholding information, that makes him an accessory to murder.
And all of a sudden, he said, look, my nephew said he did it.
Dwayne had, in fact, taken him aside and said, Uncle, I had to handle my business. And Donald said he looked at him and said, are you saying that you killed him? Dwayne said to him, I had to stand up for my mom.
Dwayne, he loved his mom. They were having some financial issues, and Dwayne thought that if this divorce could just be done with, I could get the money from the house. And I think Dwayne took it upon himself to do whatever he wanted to do, and which unfortunately led to the homicide.
There was tension between Jimmy and Dwayne already. So there was that divorce, money, financial implication, motive.
With an accessory charge hanging over his head, Donald agrees to testify against his nephew.
At that point, I called the prosecutor and told him what we had, and he said, I think it's time to go lock up Dwayne Moore for homicide.
On March 26, 2013, Dwayne Moore is charged with the murder of his own stepfather.
I'm telling you, he just had no remorse, no confessions. He just didn't have any care in the world whatsoever.
When I heard Dwayne had been charged with Jimmy's murder, I felt a lot of relief.
I was shocked to know that someone that he had influenced this long in this young man's life that would take his life.
I went deep to my core as far as emotionally. This was unbelievable because of who Jimmy was.
14 months later, Dwayne Moore stands before the Memphis judge and jury. The prosecution lays out what they believe happened the night of the murder.
Dwayne had it in his head that he was going over there to kill him. He knew that there was a key to the house that Carla might have forgot about. I think he waited until he saw Jimmy pull in, let himself in that front door. Pulled the gun out as soon as he saw Jimmy and started shooting. I think he did it in about 5 minutes at the most. I think he just went in there and started blasting away.
To try to imagine what Jimmy must have gone through in the final moments that he was living is extremely painful. The awful terror he must have felt, knowing that his life was about to end.
On June 27, 2014, Dwayne Moore is convicted and sentenced to 22 years in prison without the possibility of parole.
It hurts. It hurts that somebody thought so little of my family, that they could take somebody so precious to us.
While Jimmy's family still misses him every day, his love for educating young people lives on.
To honor Jimmy's memory, we established a scholarship in his name at the University of Arkansas at Conway.
I think Jimmy will want to be remembered by being a godly man, a kind man, and a peaceful man.
That's what helps me to try to let the anger go. Don't be mad. Just thank God that he was here and that he was my brother for as long as he was. I miss him and I love him.
For more information on an unexpected killer, go to oxygen.com.
Police emergency, how can I help you?
It was a violent, frenzied, and very, very aggressive attack. It almost severed his head.
If members of the public have any information at all, this was an 83-year-old family man. It was a brutal attack with no known motive at this time.
It's such a quiet and peaceful place. It just seemed incredible it could happen here.
This was the biggest manhunt.
From the instant I saw him, I realised he didn't fit in. I do regret not following him to see where he went.
Can you explain to me why your DNA is on that man?
East Harling, a quaint village nestled in the heart of the South Norfolk countryside.
It's a lovely little place to live in. It's really quiet, but it's got a lot of sense of community, a lot of pockets of very different helpful people, sports, and there's a couple of pubs.
Really nice place to live, safe place really. You know, everyone a lot of people know each other around here.
With its bountiful forests and country walks to enjoy a quieter pace of life, Harling and its neighbouring villages are the perfect places for many to set up home.
People will usually say hello to you and you can stop and have a conversation. A lot of dog walkers in the area, of which I'm one. And you know, they definitely always speak, pass the time of day with you.
Harling Heath, a really, really nice place to walk, and we use it for biking, running and dog walking.
The heathlands on the edge of the villages has long been a draw for dog walkers. But this idyllic setting was shattered early one morning when a body was discovered in brambles on the heath.
Police emergency, how can I help you?
He was found by a couple that were walking their dogs. They saw his dogs walking without anyone, and then as they approached the scene, they could see some blood on the ground and his body partly covered by some brambles just off the pathway. The police were called.
I just remember it was a Saturday, I was at home, and I just remember hearing these police sirens screaming through the village.
I didn't actually come till the afternoon and arrived here. So all these police cars are the way. All these police cars are around for us, but it's quite bizarre.
Rumours about the discovery of a body in undergrowth fly through the villages.
An initial assessment suggested that he may have been subject to an animal attack.
One early theory was an attack from an animal, and that was mainly led from the extent of the injuries. Obviously, there's Banham Zoo, not a huge distance away.
I was very sceptical of that because we know what's in the woods, and I can't think of a wild animal that had been over there to do such damage, to kill somebody. There isn't animals over there to do that.
The news spreads among the local dog walking community. Could a wild animal really have attacked and killed a man on their doorstep?
There was a sense of fear, but that kind of not really believing it was going on. in the village.
I think it was a bit of a shock to everybody. And it's not something that happens in this area. It certainly put us off walking our dogs there for a while. I had a young daughter at the time, she was only 3, and I wasn't keen on taking her there, you know.
Rookie journalist Zach Ward was one of the first to get wind of the story.
So at the time, I felt shocked, I felt surprised. This was my first job in journalism. It was our goal to try and handle it sensitively. The stories we normally covered at This Express were very community-based, they were human interest. It was about council tax going up. It was people's 100th birthdays. It was that level of local news. So when we say things like this don't happen, that's not a cliche, it's genuine. We had really very little experience in covering this major event.
Police finally identify the body in the woods as 83-year-old Peter Wrighton. But who is he?
Mr. Wrighton was retired. He lived with his wife. He had 2 dogs, one 13 and one 9 or 10 years old, that he walked regularly.
He had retired to Banham, which is about 5 miles as the crow flies to East Harling. He'd worked for BT for 35 years. He'd been married for 59 years, and he sounded like a gentle, kind, loving man. Loved his dogs. He was walking with Gemma and Dylan at the time, and they both stayed with the body, which I think that tells you the bond between dog and owner. But he sounded like a really well-respected member of the community, and we got an outpouring of tributes and sympathy once his name had been released.
The first time we moved in, we went and introduced ourselves to the neighbours. Peter and Anne were very, very welcoming. One of our first things to do was to invite them over for a meal.
They were always friendly. You go over there, they're always welcome to. And obviously they used to take their dogs out for a walk, both of them. And they loved dogs. They took in a lot of rescue dogs.
Father of 2, Peter was a daily visitor with his 2 dogs to the Heath, just a few miles from his home in Banham. Tragically, on the morning of his death, his wife Anne had gone in search of him when he hadn't returned home.
Been shopping, and on my way back, I was driving by, and Anne pulled out her car and drove towards Harling. I thought that was rather unusual for her to go out and leave the house empty without them being out together. I didn't think much more of it than that.
Mr. Wrighton had failed to return home, and Mrs. Wrighton became concerned and actually drove out to the Heath to look for her husband in case possibly he'd had a medical event or become lost. As she approached the scene, she made herself known to the police, who were already there.
While Peter's wife is escorted home, his body is taken for a post-mortem examination to verify the cause of death.
When the post-mortem took place, it was established that he had received quite a violent attack, probably initially from behind. Many of the stabbing injuries were to the back of his neck and a cut across his throat that actually cut all the way back to the spinal column. May have taken 4 or 5 sideways cuts. It almost severed his head. There were other significant injuries, a stab wound that went into his left eye.
The result immediately changes the course of the investigation.
We had a phone call from Anne informing us that Peter had been murdered.
But what had gone on? Why would someone want to kill such a well-respected member of the community in such a violent way? In the quaint countryside of East Harling, a post-mortem examination has just revealed that far from being killed by a wild animal, much-loved pensioner Peter Wrighton had been murdered. But why?
I think someone may have put a suggestion forward that it could have been as a result of an animal attack. But when you consider the circumstances, it would appear the way he had been deposited, he had been dragged backwards and his arms were on top of him, which would be unlikely if he was pulled there by an animal.
Mr. Wrighton had been stabbed over 40 times, including some very deep wounds to his throat, which had almost severed his head from the rest of his body.
It was a violent and aggressive attack with only one outcome likely with the way that he was attacked.
Immediately, a murder investigation is launched to track down the killer. And everyone is a potential suspect.
This was the biggest manhunt for a long, long time.
We've got additional officers in the local area at the scene of the murder. We've also increased our patrols and our police visible presence in and around East Tarling.
They were very present, patrolling up and down the road. There was mounted police going around the village on horseback.
At the back of the forest here, the police stopped me all the cars and asking you, what were you on that day, were you here, taking your name, address and so forth.
Police officers involved in the investigation will have been looking for dog walkers in the area. People have routines and return to places quite regularly, and therefore they will also have people on the heath at the same time, the same day, several days after, to pick up those who regularly go and may have been there in the morning.
As the police were searching the crime scene here, they cut all the grass down really short. All this field was cut very short. All the hedgerow here was cut down to virtually nothing. I guess they're looking for the weapon, I guess.
As news spreads throughout the local dog walking community that there's a killer at large, so does the fear.
When the murder investigation started, nobody was walking the dogs over the woods. They didn't know who it was.
When people first found out about the murder, then I think it was one of complete disbelief that something like that had happened in the area. And then I think probably naturally mixed in with a bit of fear around who was this person that had committed the crime, and were they still at large?
I mean, this was in broad daylight. This was at 10:30 in the morning, potentially. So I think afterwards people were wary. I think people were wary about walking their dogs on their own.
Police established that the 5th of August 2017 started out like any other day for Peter Wrighton.
It was a very typical day for him. He'd been to the shop earlier, he was walking his dogs.
Peter was picked up on CCTV at a local shop at 9:57 a.m. His car was spotted at 10:14 a.m, heading to the heathland to walk his 2 dogs. 30 minutes later, his body was discovered.
Police emergency, how can I help you?
Mr. Wrighton's wallet was still on him. His car keys were still with him, making it unlikely that it was a robbery. The heath really is a friendly area that people go for relaxation and just to walk dogs and just to get out and get some fresh air, etc. It's not somewhere where you would expect this level of violence.
Another potential theory was around other uses of the area. One dog walker who had used the area quite regularly had mentioned to police that he thought there was suspicious activity involving drugs and people buying drugs around that area.
Police quickly rule out a robbery gone wrong. So who would want to cause this quiet, friendly pensioner harm?
The majority of murders occur between people who know each other. And so an initial line of inquiry would be to establish those people who know him and anyone who may have any sort of grudge or dislike or whatever for Mr. Wrighton. You tend to work in concentric circles around the victim, and so you look very close and then you gradually branch out and expand your inquiry. eliminating people as you go.
Peter was quite reserved, he was quite quiet, because he was such a kind, gentle soul, and happily married to Anne. It didn't make any sense. How could somebody be so wicked? To pick on somebody so kind, so loving?
His son and daughter live away and could be easily established as not having been in the Norfolk area, so that would eliminate those family members. And therefore the police then need to look further outside the family unit and expand their inquiries.
You know, we tried to think about people that knew all of us. Could it be anybody that we knew?
Any other significant friendships or relationships before his move to the area?
And we came up with no's everywhere, so it had to be random.
With no obvious clues in Peter's past, police turned to the media and the public for help.
If members of the public have any information at all, even if people think this is a small snippet of information, tell us, because it might be a small bit of information that's the final piece of a jigsaw that we need. We're really, really keen for anybody that was in and around the area between 9 a.m. and 11 a.m. on Saturday the 5th of August. This was an 83-year-old family man. It was a brutal attack with no known motive at this time, leaving behind a wife and children.
Another major line of inquiry is through the media to try to gain intelligence from and identify members of the public who may have been in the area at the time.
The police had appealed for information, and the initial amount of people coming forward with information was really, really high. We're talking about the hundreds.
It's important you get to people as soon as possible so that that image is as clear as possible in their minds.
Intensive questioning of local dog walkers starts to give police some leads.
That's the day of the murder. I came up the second day and the policeman said to me, "What are you doing here?" basically. I was a little bit scared because I thought perhaps maybe they would think it was me, because my footprints would be on the soil here and everything, and touch certain things, I guess, you know, so forth. DNA, that sort of stuff, I guess. I don't know how that kind of works, but quite scary at the time.
Didn't sink in at first. And then when they're talking about, oh, it happened such and such, and I thought, well, I was in the forest then.
So as part of the appeals, initially the police were wanting to speak to 2 male individuals and gave very detailed descriptions.
Police rule out the 2 dog walkers. But Peter Bibby is pulled in for questioning.
I had an interview at work, an interview at home, where they took all fingerprints, DNA. That's it. Good boy. They even took DNA off the dog, took all my clothes. Good boy. Yeah, it was quite harrowing, but I suppose everybody's a suspect till you're proven innocent.
But unknown to Peter, something he had witnessed on the morning of the 5th of August was about to turn the investigation on its head.
It was a normal day over the heath. Met quite a few new people, which was quite nice, a few of the people that I used to know. Yeah, just a really nice, peaceful day. Yeah, this is the route that I took. I regularly walked this ridge, and this gate wasn't there at the time, so I would come along here, and then I turned down and walked back through the woods in a round circle. Saw somebody walking towards us, and he just didn't look right. He wasn't dressed for walking in the forest. He didn't have a dog. He wasn't with anybody else. It was just totally out of sync.
Through their inquiries, they identified another person who'd been dog walking on the heath at the time, who had spoken to someone who seemed out of place. Didn't seem to be dressed to be walking, didn't have a dog. You know, dog walkers tend to, it's not a uniform they wear, but they tend to dress in similar ways and know who looks in or out of place.
On his feet, he had like heavy-duty flip-flops and a pair of shorts and a T-shirt. Very smartly dressed and was totally out of character for walking dogs in the forest. We were both walking up wheel ruts of a car. So I was walking up the right-hand one, he was coming down the left-hand one. When we actually passed, he was about this far away from me. I could have put my hand out and touched him. If I hadn't said hello to him, he'd have definitely walked past me and wouldn't have given me the time of day. There was no chance of any eye contact, not even any fainted little glances. He had his head forward and he was just walking forward and ignoring everything. And then he went on, and then I was wondering to myself, what's he doing? Where's he going? It's not right.
He provided an e-fit of this person that became very key to the investigation later on.
I do regret not following him to see where he went. Yeah. And that's sort of like bugged me for a while.
Suddenly, police have a description of a man they believe could hold the key as to what went on that morning on the heathland. They release an e-fit. But who is this man? And is he a killer? The rural Norfolk countryside is still reeling 6 days after 83-year-old Peter Wrighton was murdered on the heathland while walking his dog.
Shocking events such as these have a significant impact on the community. One of the first things the local police inspector will do is a community impact assessment to try and reach out to the community and reassure them that the police are doing as much as they can to protect them and to resolve whatever the incident is that's happened.
Such a shock for this area because it's so safe and so sort of old-fashioned in a way. I guess you leave your doors unlocked, you leave your keys in your car, and no one expects you to get murdered. It's just quite bizarre. Afterwards, people are quite scared of walking the dogs in the forest.
Police still have no suspects, no murder weapon, and no motive.
I think any time there has been a murder in these sort of circumstances and no one's been found, there's likely to be wariness, there's likely to be some people who sadly won't want to leave the house. That shock was always there, I think. It was random, it was unprovoked, it literally could happen to anybody.
It wasn't safe for any of us. If there's a murder already, it's murdered Peter. Was it something personal or not? We didn't know. After the murder of Peter, I was very reluctant to leave the house.
Having turned to the public for help, police receive information about a man who had stood out on the heath on the morning of the murder.
I just saw his feet first, and I thought he's wearing like heavy-duty flip-flops. It's not the sort of attire that you'd think of going dog walking. Pair of shorts on. Most people don't wear shorts through there because of the nettles, bits of bracken and all sorts of stuff like that. He was walking with a purpose.
Police release an e-fit of the man described, and suddenly there's a breakthrough. Police receive a tip-off about a local man, 24-year-old Alexander Palmer.
So, following the police appeals, a psychiatrist who had worked with Alexander Palmer then came forward with some concerns around previous things that Palmer had said.
The psychologist told the police that when treating Alexander Palmer, he had ideations of violent attacks, often with a knife.
Palmer had talked about his desire to attack random people. The voice in his head he called Little Alex.
Once Alexander Palmer was known to the inquiry, he was allocated to a team of detectives as a person of interest. Having obtained a photograph from Facebook, it was immediately apparent that there was a very strong likeness with the e-fit that had been provided by one of the dog walkers.
So at the time we knew that Palmer was 24 years old and he lived in Cringleford in Norfolk, and he had previously been a part of the armed forces.
Having identified Alexander Palmer as a suspect, an arrest strategy was prepared and he was arrested at 4:40 the following morning.
News of the arrest quickly spreads.
I wasn't sleeping. Quite paranoid about it all. I always kept looking at my iPad, to see if there'd been any updates. And I think there's one at 3 o'clock in the morning, the first published Alexander's name. So I quickly thought I'd have a look at Facebook. And lo and behold, there he was. As soon as I saw him on Facebook, I realised that was him. Without a shadow of a doubt.
After Alexander was arrested, they'd informed Anne, and Anne informed us that someone had been arrested for it, which was a relief for us.
As part of the arrest strategy, having been brought into custody, various forensic samples and a DNA swab will have been taken from Palmer, which will have been fast-tracked to the laboratory to try to get a profile as soon as possible. Having an outstanding profile from Mr. Wrighton's trousers, they need to know as soon as possible whether there could be any link to Alexander Palmer.
With forensic evidence being processed, Palmer himself is brought in for questioning.
Alex, can I get you to introduce yourself, please? Alexander Hobbs Palmer. As I said, the e-fit was prepared from a description. Have a look at that. What would you say about that?
That's a pretty good likeness.
Alexander admitted that he had been in the area at the time.
During the first interview, Palmer revealed that he had been in the area. He said that he had travelled there and feeling depressed, he had stood there and had cried to himself and had walked about and then returned to his car, parked somewhere separately and had another walk and then left the area.
He was quite adamant about it, that he had not done it. He was not the killer. There was a Roman road that dissected the wood. Mr. Wrighton had been killed on the west side of the road. Alexander said that he'd been on the east side at all times. I found him to be pretty calm, composed. He was intelligent.
Despite Palmer's denials, on the ground, detectives worked tirelessly to find evidence to link him to the crime.
You're looking for something that will link him to the scene, something that will link him to Mr. Wrighton. So you're going to look for any clothes that have been worn at any locations that he's been to, so a house, lock-up, work, vehicles that he may have used, looking to seize as many items as possible to initially assess them and then send them for forensic examination.
And it isn't long before forensic investigations start to produce results.
It was the second day of interviews that the positive result on the DNA matching Alexander Palmer to the DNA profile found on the trousers, probably where he dragged Mr. Wrighton into the bushes, grabbing his trousers to pull him along.
What could be his DNA was found on Mr. Wrighton's trousers, and what could have been Mr. Wrighton's blood was found on the collar of a jacket that belonged to Alexander.
That was the main evidence to link Alexander Palmer to Peter Wrighton, and obviously that then entered into the interview strategy.
Can you explain to me why your DNA is on that man?
I'm afraid I can't without knowing.
You don't need to know. It's irrelevant where it is. You say you haven't met him. Why is your DNA on him?
For instance, I could have lost a hair follicle and caught on his shoe. That's just me speculating, but without knowing, I couldn't venture a guess.
Okay.
Police now have a DNA link between the two men, but need further proof linking Palmer to the crime.
A search of his car identified a map which had markings on it indicating the area of the heath, which is obviously of interest because it indicates some sort of pre-planning before going to the scene.
There was ANPR data, the number plate recognition, which put Palmer at the location at the day of the murder.
Some ANPR evidence had been recovered with Palmer driving his car in the morning when dropping his partner off in the city, which showed him apparently in a white or light-coloured shirt, and when he was seen picking her up in the afternoon, he was seen in a dark-coloured shirt. And yet his account was that he had been wearing the same clothes all day, but he appeared to have changed his clothing, and none of that clothing, which is highly likely to have been heavily bloodstained, was ever recovered.
Police believe they have irrefutable proof that Palmer killed Peter Wrighton, but they still don't know why or what with, and their suspect is now refusing to talk.
I'll ask you again, were you involved in the murder of Peter Wrighton? No comment.
He made it very clear that he was not guilty, was not responsible, and he hadn't done the killing. And that remained his position throughout.
Detectives analyse Palmer's phone records and come across a damning photograph.
It was established that he had bought a hunting-type knife, and in fact there was a picture of it, I think, on his phone. That picture of the knife was shown to the forensic pathologist, who confirmed that it could have caused the injuries.
Alexander Palmer is charged with murder. But what was his motive? And what drove him to kill? February 2018. And Alexander Palmer is standing trial at Nottingham Crown Court, accused of murdering Peter Wrighton in August 2017. A crime which had sent shockwaves through the small, close-knit community of East Harling.
I think my first initial thought was, whoever done this is a coward. The nature of the frenzy that murderer did. It was a cowardly act on an old man who's out walking dogs.
Totally shocked. I couldn't believe it, because it's such a quiet and peaceful place. It just seemed incredible it could happen here. It just seemed impossible, really.
Prior to the court case, Palmer has to undergo psychological assessments to determine his capacity to stand trial.
I believe he was initially sent to Belmarsh Prison and then to Rampton for that assessment. And the question to be answered was Alexander Palmer mad or bad? Had he carried out this attack because of a mental illness that he was suffering from, or was he just a very violent and nasty person?
So who is Alexander Palmer?
When I first met Alexander, he was 24 years old. He'd been 23 at the time of the offence. He had no previous convictions, no cautions, no findings of guilt, no reprimands, nothing, so far as the police were concerned, that would suggest that he would commit such a violent offence. He'd served in the British Army till about 2015. He had trained and qualified as a commando, one of the few who actually qualified in his year. But there was one thing of note. In March of 2014, a fellow trainee had stamped on his head, and that was plainly the beginning of his mental problems. Because of that, he had been medically discharged from the army.
Throughout 2015, Palmer was treated as both an inpatient and an outpatient in mental health services, seen by several different psychologists, but one expressed concern to the police after seeing media appeals about the murder.
One of the people that contacted the control room was a psychologist who had worked previously with Palmer following an assault on Palmer whilst he was serving in the forces that had an effect on him.
And one piece of information comes to light which is particularly chilling.
The psychologist told the police that he had a dislike for dog walkers.
Dog walkers, he said, were a particular bugbear of his.
He was obviously suffering some mental health problems brought on by PTSD. He had some kind of grievance with dog walkers is the thing that stands out.
He had made disclosures about ideations around violence and a dislike of dog walkers.
Having been deemed fit to stand trial, the court hears how Alex had revealed on arrest that he heard voices in his head.
Palmer had talked about the voice in his head he called Little Alex.
Is there a different Alex? Times, yes. Okay, who's he? He used to manifest himself as a physical hallucination, but now he's just a voice. Is he still with us? Yes. Is he here today? Yes. Where is he now? What is him here? He's there, is he?
Palmer admits being on the Heathlands on the day of the murder.
So was Alex there that day? The other Alex?
He's always there. So
He's always there, so he would have been with you, okay? Was he? Do you remember him talking to you on that day? You don't? But you say he talks to you every day?
Yes.
He's there laughing at you. But you say he doesn't tell you what to do. He doesn't force you to do things or anything like that.
Palmer, during the court case, had said that he had visited the woodland because he was feeling low, but didn't say that he'd been involved in the attack.
But the prosecution puts forward evidence linking Palmer to Peter Wrighton.
Several of Mr. Wrighton's clothes were sent for forensic examination, and they had identified DNA from a person on the length of his trousers.
I believe there was DNA found on Mr. Wrighton as well, which linked Palmer to the murder.
The court also hears that on the morning of the murder, ANPR cameras picked up Palmer's black Ford Focus on the A11, heading towards the Heath. Mobile phone records reveal he is stationary on the area of the Heath from 10:19 a.m. for a period of 32 minutes and 55 seconds. His car is then picked up heading north on the A11. The whole journey, police believe, had been planned in advance.
A search of his car identified a map with the area marked out.
In fact, investigations reveal Palmer had completed the exact same journey 2 weeks prior to the murder. Had it been a practice run, or had he intended to kill on that day? Either way, it was Peter who found himself at the end of Palmer's wrath on that fateful day.
Why did you pick Peter?
Being that Peter's about my stature and a bit older than I am, Peter was easy prey for Alexander.
But did Peter actually try to help this man? We don't know. Nobody will ever know. Because this man won't say anything now. Did Peter try to help him? Peter suffered for it. We don't know.
It was also revealed that despite his age and smaller stature, Peter had tried to fight off his attacker.
He had what we would refer to as defensive marks on his hand. It would appear that he tried to grab the blade of the knife to stop his assailant.
It was unprovoked, and he was a very, very old man that couldn't defend himself. Alexander's quite a strong lad, you know, military background, very fit and able. Peter Wrighton could hardly stand up. I think very cowardly.
The prosecution revealed further evidence that Palmer had planned to kill. Police had found a notebook in a storage facility belonging to Palmer, in which it appeared he had written of his plans.
So in January of 2015, he said he was thinking of going for dog walkers. He said that he hated dog walkers and that if he did this, he would be up on a pedestal, up with the big ones. Everyone would look up to him. Everyone would know his name.
But while police did discover the notebook, there's one thing they never did find: the knife he used to kill Peter.
The prosecution case would be that the steps that he had taken to get rid of any forensic evidence would indicate a knowledge of what he had done and an intention to cover up what he had done.
On the advice of his barrister, Palmer does not give evidence in his trial.
I explained to him that it's his case, his future, his liberty that's at stake, and that we act as a voice for him in the courtroom.
The notebook, DNA, witness statements, and the e-fit, as well as Palmer's medical records, are put to the court.
The prosecution case was a strong one. ANPR evidence in relation to his vehicle and cell site evidence in relation to his phone showed that he had been in the area at the relevant time. In addition to that, there was evidence from 2 eyewitnesses who had given descriptions of the person who was likely to have been Mr. Reitman's attacker. And those descriptions were quite similar to the appearance of Alexander. One of those 2 witnesses had made an e-fit, and again, the e-fit was quite similar to Alexander's appearance. There was no direct evidence, but if you put all those matters together, it represents quite a strong case.
Having heard all the evidence, the jury retire to consider their verdict.
The trial came to a conclusion and the jury found Alexander Palmer guilty of murder.
When a jury decides after 49 minutes, I think there's obviously overwhelming evidence to suggest that Palmer was the person who carried out the murder. That was the one thing that stood out for me at the trial, is how quickly they decided that Palmer was guilty of the murder.
Despite evidence of Palmer's mental health problems, the judge ruled that he had meticulously planned the murder.
The statutory sentence is life imprisonment, but there is a recommendation from the judge, which in this case was 28 years. I would suggest that the fact that once convicted and imprisoned, he was sent to a normal prison rather than a psychiatric prison indicates that the assessment was that he was a violent and nasty person.
Good girl, good girl. Come on.
The dog walkers of East Harling will never forget the horrifying crime which leaves its mark on this close-knit community.
Not the same in the forest here for months. People were not relaxed, very nervous, looking over the shoulder all the time. I was doing the same, actually, looking over your shoulder, seeing what cars were parked here. It was very bizarre, kind of a chilling feeling afterwards.
And for Peter Bibby, his brush with evil will live with him forever.
It was quite a scary thing, and it's all the what ifs. What if I had gone back? You know, would have changed things. I was walking straight forward to him. It could have been me.